Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. Hey, welcome back everyone to another episode of the Crazy Chicken People podcast. Today we are talking about the complex details of chickens' social lives within their flock, where status is determined through measured pecks, resounding crows, and submissive postures. As many of you know, and despite what so many people believe, chickens are not these solitary, emotionless birds that just eat and lay eggs. They're incredibly social, and they have very intricate behaviors that play a really important role in the well-being of not just themselves, but of the entire flock. As I'm sure you've seen, chickens have a wide range of behaviors that would be difficult for the average person who's not familiar with them to notice. But for those of us who watch our flocks closely and know the personalities of our birds, you know that they have a very tight-knit social circle and that they establish these social hierarchies. They communicate and they teach each other things through their different vocalizations and through body language. And all these behaviors that we love to watch, they are very entertaining, but they're certainly not just for show. So for us as chicken keepers, the better understanding we have of these behaviors, then the better we can also do to provide the right environment for them. So as we get more into chickens' behavior, keep in mind, these are intricate social animals. If you've looked a chicken in the eyes, especially when you hold one, and they do that funny head cock thing, and they're looking at you, you can really tell that they're thinking, maybe they're judging you or evaluating your place in their world and their pecking order, which would make sense, especially, if you raised that bird, you were probably the first human face they saw, or at least the one they remember. Pecking order does begin to form very early on in a group of chickens, really in as little as just after that first couple weeks, 2.5 weeks or so. You'll really start to see even those young chicks start to assert some dominance, and they'll use some body language to kind of show that they want to be in charge. One of the questions I see posted a lot in chicken groups is, hey, is this a hen or a rooster? And well, I'm not real good at sexing a chick or, even just a young bird on specific physical traits when they're very similar between sexes. I'm usually pretty good at spotting the roosters early on, just watching their behavior. And it's not always accurate. You can get some pretty assertive hens too. But if you pay attention, they will show you through little things that they do, at least the personality type. And that body language that they start to develop early on, along with all their different vocalizations and the pecking they will do to each other. These are all things that they learn along the way so that they can determine that pecking order within the flock that they live, which is very important. There's a lot of issues that can come up within the flock that the pecking order will help to resolve before it becomes like a real problem. Having that established hierarchy, it helps the chickens to allocate resources like food and water, nesting spots. Higher ranking birds are going to get priority access on these things. And I think most often with roosters, even though they're at the top of the order, they also help to make sure that everybody does get at least their fair share. My guy Zeus is so good about this. Like when I'm throwing treats in there, he'll run in and he'll make sure he's just kind of in charge of the whole situation. But then he just sort of guides everything from there. He really does a great job making sure that no one's getting in a fight, everybody's getting some, and then he'll kind of pick at it here and there as well. He does get his, but just does such a great job of keeping things very neutral and peaceful within that flock, which is super important. The pecking order has an influence on so many aspects of the chicken's day-to-day life. If you watch closely, you'll see things like roosting spots or access to nesting boxes, the best spot for a dirt bath. These are all determined by each bird's social rank in the flock. And because of this, it's going to reduce aggression in the flock. Things are going to be a lot calmer. They won't be quite as stressed because they all know their spot in the pecking order. And while, that can seem a little aggressive, you hate to see like one of your sweet, mild mannered girls getting pecked at. It is just an important tool that they use to establish that dominance. And then once it's settled, the flock is going to be much better off for it. They're all going to understand how to interact with each other. And it takes away some stress and anxiety and just promotes just an overall positive atmosphere. And, even though there's always going to be somebody on that bottom rung, and you might think that they might get lonely or be picked on, that's usually not going to be the case. The pecking order actually helps to reinforce kind of bonding amongst the birds to the point that, they learn to rely on each other for protection, for companionship, for warmth when it's cold. It can actually help the lower ranking chickens to avoid confrontation where they might get injured in a fight because they're both going for the same spot on the roost or the same nesting box. Again, they're going to know where they belong, which overall is good for everybody. You've probably noticed even a squabble between just a couple of birds can erupt into something that can cause chaos for everybody and just kind of stress everybody out. I'll even see, chickens in a nearby coop start to squawk and get a little crazy when they hear a fight going on somewhere else. So it is important that they all sort of understand their place. And while that is all natural behavior, extreme aggression or bullying that, might lead to health issues, that does need to be monitored. And as you study your flock and start to see how things are forming, you do still need to keep an eye out for chickens that might be getting overly aggressive, taking the pecking too far. You don't want there to be a single bird that's just completely thrown off the balance for everybody. That can just bring your whole flock down. You don't want them living in chaos every day. In fact, this is actually what led me to creating my free ranging flock. Early on, I realized that I had a few chickens that just could not find a way to live peacefully within a flock, or at least within a contained flock. And I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew that I had to separate them from the others. Lucky was the first. In fact, that I remember I had to remove her from several flocks that I had tried to get her to find peace in. I tried to move her in with some younger pullets, thinking that she would just take charge and, take that top spot and then it would be fine. But that didn't work. She just couldn't live peacefully with any of them. So after a few months, I decided that she and the other chickens would live happier lives separately. And this happened to be at the same time that I was dealing with a little silky rooster named Sour Cream. Same story, just could not be with the other silky groups without being an absolute menace. He was just constantly starting fights. He was way overly aggressive with the hens. After he would mount, he would just stand there and hold them down, and he was brutal. So I had to get him out of there, but I didn't want to just send him down the road. So him and Lucky, I decided I would give a shot at, they were living in the barn, and then they, have run of just the whole yard. And this began the cutest chicken love story that I've seen, at least. Lucky, the big, red, very strong, independent hen, and Sour Cream, very small, just little white silky, who was a terrorizer. They were the perfect match, and they became inseparable, and I'm sure that they loved each other very much. In fact, one of the funniest things that I have seen happen between chickens is actually a good lead into the communication aspect that I wanted to talk about. But Lucky, she definitely did not want anything to do with any of the other roosters that were running around. As time went on, more birds got added to the free ranging flock, but it was Lucky and Sour Cream, and that was it. But Darth Vader, who, despite his name, is actually a very sweet bird, he definitely had eyes for Lucky. So whenever he would come around, I would notice that she would actually call for Sour Cream if he wasn't right there. Quick sound, but it was the same one every time, and he would come running and chase off Vader. So one day, I see Lucky walk out of the barn and over to the feeder, and Vader is over there, and I noticed Sour Cream wasn't with her. And So Vader starts to make his move to get towards Lucky. She calls for him, and I'm kind of watching this, like staring at them with the barn open behind him. I see Sour Cream come running, and like he tried to slow down before he stepped off the concrete, but instead just sort of slid. So he's like running out the barn, slides that last foot or so off the concrete, like one hop, lands, immediately jumps, kicks Vader off of Lucky. They both go tumbling, and without losing momentum, he continues to chase that rooster across the yard. It was just too much. It was funny. And I remember, as funny as it was, I remember just how cool it was to see that call for help and how quickly it was responded to. And chickens use a range of different calls to communicate different messages. Clucking, for example, is just, chickens saying like they're happy and everything's great. Where on the other hand, squawking and rapid high pitched calls might signal a danger and alert the rest of the flock to that. And chickens are actually very in tune to the danger call. That's when they get right away and they're going to kind of crouch down or seek shelter, but they know that there's something to be on the lookout for. They have food calls, and if they're out foraging, they might let the others know that they found a good spot. Or if they're the first to see you coming towards the coop to throw something in there, they might let out a call to let everyone know you're coming. And, a rooster is letting you know that you're in his territory when he's crowing. He's asserting that dominance and just putting everybody on notice, like this is his space. And then additionally, they use body language to communicate so many things as well. A dominant chicken, be it a hen or a rooster, might puff up its feathers and spread its wings and kind of strut around very confidently, right, to assert that authority. Where a more submissive chicken, on the other hand, might kind of crouch down, lower their heads, even just kind of turn around and kind of do that little squat, to the higher ranking chickens. And, they can also convey emotional status to one another, both through sound and body language. And, when they are in distress, you'll hear a difference in their tone, much more intense and maybe erratic because they are possibly in a panic mode. But all these forms of communication, they're all very important to the overall well-being of the flock. It keeps them all on the same page. And by being able to interpret each other's signals, chickens can reduce any conflicts and really just help to protect each other. This ability to communicate and to understand what's going on in the other animals around them, it seems to help them thrive when living around different species. At least that's my experience. There's a couple of my roosters that do free range. They live more with the goats than anybody else. They've got this just incredibly tight bond with Eeyore and Remy. They'll forage together. They'll lay in the shade together. Sometimes they'll just perch up on their backs and catch a free ride. I've actually caught them sleeping on my donkey's back. And I mean like sleeping. This is late at night, 11, 12 o'clock. I'm down there and a couple of roosters just sleeping on the back of a donkey. I've been saying that they're good communicators, and I guess they must be. They convinced Wendell to let them stay the night. They've got a lot to say. So, maybe next time you're down there hanging with your chickens, really focus in on the sounds that you're hearing and what's going on around them, as they're communicating. You might start to pick up on some of their calls and start to kind of understand when they're talking to each other, and also get a good feel for the pecking order in your flock. Knowing that is going to better equip you to know when you should intervene when you see a problem amongst your chickens or when they've got things worked out themselves. So I hope that you have some fun looking at those things and learn a little something new about your chickens. I appreciate you guys listening today. Also, some of the messages and the pictures that you guys have sent that I've got on Instagram, super cool. Keep sending them. You guys have a great week. Talk to you next time.